man. Thanks so much for doing this. Really excited to have you on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you mind if we just jump in and get started?
Cool. Let's do it, man. I'm good.
Something that I thought was really interesting that you mentioned in the pre-show notes was just the difficulty that some people have when converting webinar attendees into sales opportunities. And thought that was interesting because for so long we've been told that webinars are great, right? And you see a lot of people try to do webinars, and most either do one or they do a few, they get results, and then they just stop doing them. And I would just be so curious from your perspective, where do you see, if there's any like consistent themes you see among your clients that you guys work with when you first start with them? Like, where are people going wrong with webinars?
Yeah. And I will answer this by first saying I went wrong with webinars for like 2 straight years. Like that is part of my story in founding Demand Shift and running webinars as a service now for dozens of clients. I was an in-house SaaS marketer at a company that sold project management software to agencies. We ran monthly webinars and a podcast for over 2 years. And while there was some indirect attribution, when I looked at the direct attribution for webinars specifically as part of that campaign, it was kind of like wah wah. It was not very good results. And I think I had 2 problems. One was I was kind of going so broad. I wanted to make sure that the content wasn't a sales pitch, that there wasn't always this kind of like, okay, well, Logan, you guys have educated us. The natural next step would be what with your company? There wasn't enough of a tie-in. So I think that I went too far on kind of the brand side that I lost some of the demand impact. The other thing, which is really, really common, we ended up naming this problem the conversion cliff. We were actually seeing good registrants. We were running webinars ongoing. Monthly, we were seeing, good registration and attendance numbers. We were seeing people in the chat that I recognized from webinar to webinar that were engaging, and yet we were hitting what I call the conversion cliff, when your registrations are here and then conversions to pipeline and booked calls are way down here, right? And the typical B2B average is about 2%, converting webinar registrants to some sort of next step, whether that's a consulting call, a demo, a trial, whatever your CTA is to kind of get people into the pipeline. And the big change that I made was actually looking at something that's fairly common in webinars is, after the registration, what do we all see? We see a thank you page, right? And I was like, that is some maybe some prime real estate that we're doing absolutely nothing with, because someone has just leaned in and said, hey, this topic is interesting, so much so that I'm going to sign up to join. Possibly, we know possibly it's not 100% attendance rate with webinars, but I'm interested. You're talking about my issue, my pain, something I want to learn about. And then at that moment of interest, we just drop them off and say, thanks, go check your inbox. And so what I did was actually borrow from another funnel I had seen from another agency friend of mine and replace that thank you page with a quick survey, and basically kind of posed it as like, hey, complete your registration process by answering a few more questions. And in that, we asked some basic demographic questions, basically to kind of get people in the mode of answering the questions, some qualifying questions, and some questions that could help us truly mold the content to what our audience was saying. And at the end of that survey, here's the kicker, I put an opportunity for them to take a next step. So to book a demo, start a trial, whatever that CTA was. And by implementing what we call, I now call our 2-step sign-up process, where you have a registration form followed by this quick 6 to 8 question survey that allows qualified registrants to take that next step, I 5x'd my results. So we started seeing 10% or higher of webinar registrants converting to booked calls. We've seen that as high as 12 to 18% with some of our clients now at Demand Shift. And to circle it all the way back to one of the things I think people are getting wrong with webinars is they're just trying to convert people after the webinar. They're not paying enough attention to, how do I really set up my offer and my CTA during the live show, or before the webinar, and with the two-step sign-up methodology that I mentioned a second ago. And I've actually found that after the webinar, across all of our clients, is the lowest converting point in the funnel. Before and during the webinar are the highest conversion points, and I think most people are not giving enough attention to both of those. Not the live, and definitely not before, because I don't see anybody running, something like our two-step sign-up.
That's so interesting, because I think like we're taught to provide this frictionless experience, make it as easy as possible for people to sign up for your thing or take that next step. What it feels like you guys actually did, and it worked better, was added a little bit of friction, which allowed you to get more information and then make that next step way more personalized, which I'd imagine that's why it's increasing conversions for the companies you're working with. Were you at all, like, I don't know if scared is the right way to put this, but worried to add more friction to the process? Like, I'm just picturing myself going through that, not as someone that like is not wanting to add a lot of friction to experiences.
Yep.
Be like, should I do this?
Yeah, this is why the two in what we call our two-step sign-up process is so important. So what we actually do is divide it into two steps. So the first is a quick registration form where I'm usually only asking for 3 fields: first name, last name, email, which if you're using Zoom or Riverside or some sort of webinar hosting platform, usually that's kind of the minimum that you need to pass over and have a successful registration in whatever platform you're using. Then what we actually do is that thank you page, it's a redirect. It's a second step in the process. So even if people don't complete the survey, they still get registered. So there's a little bit of more steps, but there's actually not any more friction to actually getting them registered. What's surprising though, is that we regularly see 90% or more of people who fill out the registration form finish the survey.
Yeah.
And so that was really surprising to me. But at the same time, we're not losing that 10% because, like I said, we've broken it up into 2 steps. And there's a couple different ways you can do that depending on your redirects and passing over the info from one form to the next survey. I won't have time to kind of get into that. Happy to talk shop with folks that are interested. But that to me was kind of the way to avoid this double-edged sword that we always have, this kind of Sophie's choice for marketers. Like, do I have fewer fields and higher conversion, or do I have more fields and maybe more qualified registrations or more custom, all the things we know that we can do when we get more first-party data from our end customers.
So interesting, because I've set up webinars for my own company and talked with other founders that are doing webinars, and we spend so much time on the day of the webinar, right? The live event. But what I've heard you say, and it does make sense, these early stages of people signing up and preparing for a webinar, that's actually when there's so much excitement and momentum built up. I'm thinking of times where I've actually forgotten that I've registered for a webinar, right? And then you get to the day and you're like, I don't really want to attend that. But at that point in time, when they're just seeing you and they're excited about the opportunity, it makes total sense. And it's super simple, but makes total sense to actually load up that experience versus selling after the webinar is done.
Yeah, that's the moment, like you said, when there's momentum, right?
Yeah.
Something encouraged them in the email, the social post, the ad that they saw that said, I am interested in this. So much so that I don't know if anybody listening to this is like me. Hit me up on LinkedIn and let me know if I'm just a weirdo. But do any of you guys just sign up for a webinar and you never even look at the date or the time? You're just like, I'm interested in this topic, and if it falls at a good time, I'll show up. And if not, I know I'll probably get the recording, right? And so to your point, that's when you're interested. That's kind of when you're hooked. Why would we not leverage that momentum to keep things moving in the process? And I think that's the biggest mental shift that folks can make to see more results from their webinars. We had one client who just engaged us for a short consulting project. We have some clients where we run kind of their full funnel. We set up this 2-step sign up. We run promotions. We help produce the webinar. I interview their subject matter experts. We have some that are just like, hey, can you kind of look at our funnel and help us build a version of what you guys do for your done for you clients at Demand Shift? We did that. We helped them set up a version of our two-step sign-up process based on what their tech stack was. And they went from month over month booking 0 calls before, during, or after each of their monthly webinars to the very first one booking 18. And mind you, these were all qualified because we didn't show the calendar booking link at the end of the survey to anyone who wasn't qualified. If they, kind of DQ'd themselves based on their survey answers, then you just drop them off on a thank you page, or you could redirect them to a downsell offer, or you could redirect them to your newsletter or some other sort of content offer because maybe you want to keep them engaged, that sort of stuff. So the conversion to the book call is actually only one path once you kind of open up this door of, like you said, enhancing the experience on the front end when people register and show interest for your webinars.
Curious, have you had some people come to you that actually get a ton of attendees to their webinar, but they're realizing that just because they have a ton of attendees, it's not actually influencing their pipeline because maybe they're not qualifying them a bunch, or they're not being intentional about registration process and things like that? Like because it almost seems like you could have a subset of companies that is like, man, we're crushing it. Our webinar registrations are so high. You're doing great, marketing team. And in reality, if that's actually not converting to pipeline, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, absolutely. We recently surveyed over 250 B2B marketers about their webinar programs. And I forget the exact number, but it was an alarmingly high percentage to me that of marketing teams that did not actually track their metric of what is their conversion rate from webinar registrants to pipeline or booked calls or whatever that next step is. They knew their registration numbers. I have all those from 250 plus teams. They knew their attendance rates, right? Oh, we're getting people to show up, but we actually don't actively track or know what our conversion is. That's a problem for a channel that's really known for, we're capturing email addresses, we're capturing leads, we're handing off lead lists to sales. This is, not just kind of top of funnel brand awareness. This is a demand gen channel, yet we're not seeing the demand gen results. So you're exactly right. And that's what we call that conversion cliff. We're celebrating the registrants and the attendance rate, and we're not seeing the conversion to pipeline.
Yeah. And I know you're going to be biased when I ask this question, but I want to hear your insight. It seems like webinars, especially in this world where so many people are spamming inboxes with outbound on different channels, whether it's LinkedIn, email, etc. Seems like webinars are such a great way to actually put a face to the brand and build trust with your audience, and it can lead to higher conversions. And again, I know you're going to be biased, but do you see more and more people realizing that this is truly a tactic that can work for you if you build it out intentionally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you can make the content educational and valuable and still have it be worth it to where you are converting. And like I said, there's kind of, like it's in the very beginning, you can go too far in education, you can go too far in it being a sales pitch. And so I'm not going to say that it's just simple, just snap your fingers and it happens. But if you can kind of stay in the middle of the road and avoid those ditches on either side, then it can be really effective. And I think there are two reasons, webinars specifically. One, we've seen a lot of success doing cold email campaigns for our clients to get people to sign up for their webinars. Because like you said, when you get a LinkedIn pitch, you get cold email, it's usually a direct conversion ask, right? It's the same mistake people make with a lot of their LinkedIn ads. They don't put any kind of thought leadership, valuable content in front of folks, warm them up, and then offer some sort of conversion. And so I think webinars are a great way to put content out in front of folks, even in cold channels. Number two, people are really hesitant now versus 10, let alone 15 years ago to give you their email, right? That exchange of like, okay, now I know I'm a lead, I'm going to get followed up with, yada, yada, yada. With webinars, that barrier there, that wall kind of comes down just a little bit because it's like, well, I need the calendar invite for the webinar. So it makes sense, right? Whereas an ebook, a white paper, a guide, a template, some people are like, couldn't you just put this on your blog and just send me the link? Like, why do I have to give my email for this? And so that just naturally, based on the dynamic of how the content is delivered, actually helps you be able to still capture more leads with webinars. And then the third thing I'll say, I think I said 2, but I came up with 3, is going back to what you said. It is an opportunity for people to engage with the humans behind the brand, especially in a live format. Not to mention the video clips and the repurposing that you can get out of having, your subject matter expert or your founder or whomever speak for 30, 45 minutes, an hour. But that live engagement, and I'll kind of end this section on this. My very first client at Demand Shift, I actually hopped on a sales call with him after we launched, because he saw kind of our announcement posts that I've been thinking about webinars. Maybe you could help. And I was like, "Hey, Will, have we ever actually been on a call together?" And he was like, "No, but I feel like I've been on this call dozens of times because I've been on so many of your webinars that, it just feels like a continuation of that conversation." And I was like, that is it right there. That is the game.
That's so important for people to understand, in my opinion, is that it's not just the content is not just the webinar on that day. I feel like people drop the ball because they don't realize that there is, even just from our conversation today, right? We're going to have clips produced from this, from your conversation that you're having, from the talking that you're doing, that 30 to 40 minutes, you can have social content for, the next 30 days, right? You can have different clips that come out of that. And not just clips, it could be different blog posts that come out of that, different carousels for social. So I think that's a really unique thing to really hit on, is that the webinars, great, yes, do them. But after that, there's so much more that you can produce just from that 30 to 40 minutes of time.
Absolutely.
One last question for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Is there any companies that should not be doing a webinar?
Well, I am speaking primarily with kind of the process that I've seen to B2B companies. And so if you're looking for expert advice, drilled in, doing it for years, to run webinars, and you sell B2C, you sell direct to, individuals, I'm not necessarily your guy. But for B2B companies, I can't think of a reason, why you wouldn't, unless you just don't have the bandwidth or you don't have the budget to have someone help you with it. I think the bigger danger, though, is putting a ton of budget into webinars consistently and not seeing those conversions. So if you're in that camp, I would kind of take a look at what are we doing in all 4 phases of webinars. So I like to break it down from planning to promoting to production, and then repurposing. I wish it were 4 P's. That repurposing, maybe I can emphasize the P, and it's kind of 4 P's, but those are if you're listening to this and you're like, we're running webinars, we're hitting that conversion cliff, we're spending a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and money and time and energy to produce them, but they're not converting. Maybe webinars aren't right for you, or maybe you could tweak, and get 10% more out of each of those 4 areas and actually be able to see better results and make webinars actually work for your brand.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is the best spot for people to find you and engage with you LinkedIn, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me there. Logan Lyles. My last name is Lyles. Super easy to find me there. As I mentioned, we did recently run a research report that will be dropping soon on B2B webinars. So the other thing I'll mention, if you go to demandshift.co/report, so that's demandshift.co/report, you can get access to that benchmark data from over 250 B2B marketing teams running webinars and kind of see how yours stacks up. Maybe it's not as bad as you think. Maybe it's worse than you think, but it will give you some fodder to have that conversation about looking and possibly tuning up your webinar program and get lead to better results.
Amazing. Well, I'm definitely going to be downloading that. So thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate the time. It's a great conversation. I'm sure a lot of people will find it helpful.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.